Welcome back to Niners Nightly. Larry Krueger with you on a Tuesday, and we go to the guest line for our good friend JD. Boots on the ground. It's been a busy week for JD. We got Warriors last night. We got Warriors coming up. Thursday, Wednesday, Thursday. We got then the All-Star stuff on Friday. Big All-Star weekend. JD, quite a week, huh?
Yeah, incredible when you look at the trade deadline. And I think since the last time we spoke, which was the night of the Warriors trade, I was off to L.A. And then, oh, wow, Jimmy Butler's acquired, and he's going to make his debut in Chicago. So from L.A., we go to Chicago and then back for the Super Bowl and then back in the home studio here for this week in Dubs OT. But we're doing some big things here at night on KMBR, and you're obviously a huge part of that every night at 6 o'clock, and then it's just a pleasure on those nights where the Warriors are playing, man, to be able to follow you, and we're going big, whether it's Niners coverage or Warriors coverage. It truly is the best in the Bay.
Yeah, no question. And of course, let's not forget Giants coverage. Giants report pitchers and catchers reported today to Scottsdale, and FP Santangelo coming up top of the hour, and he will chop it up and take your phone calls and talk quite a bit of Giants ball, and I'm eager to see. I booked my trip to Scottsdale, so I'll be down there in March, and I'm looking forward to putting some eyes on it. But let's talk a little Niners here, and I haven't talked to you since the Super Bowl concluded. Give me your takeaway from Super Bowl 59. I mean, it was an Eagles beatdown. What were your takeaways?
I mean, just a complete and utter domination up front. I mean, really both sides, but the defensive line for the Eagles, I mean, Mahomes was just stymied. There was nowhere to go with it. He didn't have time. Everything was out of whack, and the Chiefs just couldn't get anything going. It felt a little early, even though Philly was dominating and we were all witnessing it, I think because we've seen the game so often where – Philly gets up 7-0, and then all of a sudden you're expecting, they're going down, they're driving again, they throw an interception. All of a sudden you're expecting, it's going to be 10-7 Philly, and Philly's dominated, right? But yet they're only up 3, and then as the game goes on, the Chiefs get more and more into it just because we've seen it, and then they keep it close, and then ultimately we see what happens in close games. And I thought, other than just the raw domination by the defensive front of the Philadelphia Eagles, it was also they made the Chiefs pay. They got stops, they got turnovers, and then they went and they scored touchdowns, which is what other teams and we've seen it with the Niners a couple of times in these Super Bowls. When the Niners were ahead, they should have been ahead by more. And that's something we said in both of those games where the 49ers wound up losing. And the Eagles got ahead, and it looked like maybe it was going to be one of those. Should have been ahead by more, but no. They scored touchdowns and just jumped all over them. And the further they got ahead, the more the pass rush, both on the edge and on the interior. I mean, the job that the guys in the interior did for Philadelphia, up the middle. I mean, Mahomes was just guys in his face, the line caving in, and the Chiefs were banged up on the offensive line. It was very reminiscent of the Tampa Bay Super Bowl, where the Buccaneers defensive line really took advantage of a Chiefs offensive line that had tackles out and guys were banged up. And every year is different, and this year, in the 2 years where the Chiefs have not been able to win the Super Bowl, their biggest issue has been up front, and a couple of defensive fronts were able to take advantage and dominate the game and make Mahomes look ordinary.
From a Niner perspective, I always look at things from a Niner lens. I mean, I just, how do you watch that Super Bowl and not go, man, the 49ers have really got to beef up on the line of scrimmage? How about Philadelphia ran the ball, JD, 45 times. Now, I kind of think Hurts and Purdy are comparable quarterbacks. I don't think either is a superstar, but I think they're both good enough to win with if you have a good enough cast surrounding them. And this game, I thought in some ways would be like, hey, Kyle, bolster that offensive line, and you don't even necessarily have to run effectively. Philly only got 3 yards a pop running wise. I mean, Kansas City and Spags' defense shut down Barkley. The longest run he had all day was 10 yards. He averaged like 2 yards a carry, but they stayed with the run. They 67% of the time they ran the ball, 45 runs for 135 yards. And I just would love to see Shanahan, once or twice, first of all, build up your offensive line so you can stay with the run. But then even if you're not running effectively, heck, if you got Brock Purdy, you could play ball control. Philly dominated the plays, dominated the time of possession. They kept the ball away from Mahomes, which is a big part of frustrating a good offense like Kansas City has. And I'd love to see the Niners at some point replicate what Philly did there, a 40-plus carry game, and just pound them, just pound the run against them.
Yeah, we've seen the 49ers able to do that in the regular season at times, and I think Kyle Shanahan has talked about it in those games and really said, hey, 30 is really the goal every game. 40 is obviously extreme and almost a sure win. The other thing, though, that allows you to do that is getting up 3 scores by the middle of the second quarter, and the Eagles could have been up 3 scores even quicker than that. When the game is being played on schedule and you don't feel like you're leaving opportunities out there, then it becomes, I think, a hell of a lot easier to do it, especially when you have the NFL's leading rusher, even though, to your point, and yeah, we were all watching the game, it's like, God, the Eagles are dominating this game, and they aren't running it. Saquon, but they know that Saquon is such a home run threat that if you keep hammering it, I kept expecting him to break one, right? Especially when the Chiefs started to get a little bit demoralized, and he never really did. And so you look at it, and it's a situation where the Eagles were still able to dominate, and that goes back to the defensive front. It goes to I thought the game plan was beautiful. The play calling was beautiful. Kellen Moore, I thought he did an excellent job just keeping the Chiefs off balance enough, some easy throws for Jalen Hurts. And let's not shade Jalen Hurts. Other than the interception, and I know he was the MVP. I think you could have gone in some different directions there, but you look at the numbers for Hurts, 17 to 22. He had it dialed. Other than the interception, he had a lot of great throws. Even the one that was the OPI that everybody was up in arms about early to A.J. Brown, that was one where you look at it and that was a great throw, like a dime. Like Jalen Hurts was really freaking good in the game, minus the one interception.
He was. He really was. I'll tell you the other thing that really screamed out to me is, man, the Niners better bolster this offensive line, because this near all Georgia defensive line is beastly. Jordan Davis is a house. Milton Williams a free agent, but Nolan Smith, Jalen Carter, Sweat. They got a front line that is just hellish to block. And the Niners better. And the other thing I took away from it is, man, the Eagles did a great job of building through the draft. They built through the draft. They didn't sign one free agent. They built through the draft.
Since the Rager pick, man, they've hit and hit and hit and hit and hit going back a few years when Jefferson ended up getting away. Like have they missed a big pick since? I'm sure they have a couple, but you look at all the dudes that are everywhere. They've nailed it.
Yeah, and then it's so funny. You mentioned Jalen Reagor. You're right. They took Jalen Reagor in the first round, and then in front of Justin Jefferson. Yeah, they could have had Justin Jefferson. So here's the question: how do the 49ers this offseason vault themselves back into the Super Bowl picture? Because most of the power rankings have the Niners 13, 14, 15 in a 32-team league. So they've dropped from, man, they're right there to they're not right there. And there's one team between them and the Super Bowl to there's 10 teams between them and the Super Bowl. So if John Lynch came to you, JD, and said, hey, JD, I see you at every game, you're at practice, you're in camp, how do we get this thing back on the rails and back on that Super Bowl trajectory so that maybe, heck, the Niners could host the Super Bowl in their home stadium next year? What do you say? How did they do it?
Yeah, the Philly template, I think, is a good one, and obviously it's a recent one because they just won the Super Bowl 2 days ago. But I think when you look at the fact that they lost the Super Bowl in gut-wrenching fashion 2 years ago, and then they had a year that got away from them. I know they still ended up making the playoffs, but they were in shambles basically at the end of 2023, that season, and they're firing coordinators, and is Sirianni going to survive, and what are they going to do? And they were able to hold it together. And, look at what they did. They went and got the NFL Offensive Player of the Year in Saquon Barkley, the guy that would become that with them. So they identified a player that was available on another team's roster that immediately came in and gave them an infusion, and then they fixed their coordinators. I mean, and again, I'm not saying the 49ers, I think they feel good about their defensive coordinator spot with Saleh coming back into the equation. And I'm with you on the defensive line. Like, I think the 49ers are going to look to really vamp up the defensive line. I think they are going to spend draft capital there. But I think sometimes having a year that ends up completely being in shambles the way that this year was for the Niners, in a greater way than even last year was for the Eagles. The Eagles were still a playoff team, 10-1, and then it all kind of fell apart for them. I think they were 1-5 at the end, or whatever it was, lost in the playoffs. But they were a mess at the end of the year and gathered themselves and figured it out. So I think from that standpoint, that the template is on par. It's sign Brock Purdy. It's beef up in the trenches. I think they have to fix their defense. To me, the offense is more easily fixable compared to the defense. The defense, I think, lacks talent. I think the offense is maybe a little bit of line help and maybe one skill guy away, and keeping Brock Purdy and maybe Kyle Shanahan taking a look in the mirror at his scheme and play calling. I think Kyle Shanahan had a bad year. Quarterbacks and running backs and receivers have bad years. Kyle had a bad year. He's a good coach. At times, he's a great coach. We put him in that conversation, I think, fairly, but he had a bad year. So I think the offense is more fixable internally, with maybe the exception of the line. And like I said, one skill guy, whether it's another running back, whether it's another receiver, whether it's a second tight end. And we talked about that last week, or a couple weeks ago. Just go get a tight end and put him with Kittle, and that's a dynamic that the 49ers haven't had, and it'll help maybe your running game because you can run more two tight end sets and all of that. But the defense, to me, Larry, is where you look at the Eagles' defense, and it wasn't just Carter making play. It was everybody. It was the third string D tackle coming, like a guy. They just had the depth that the 49ers don't have, and guys are flying around. And you look at the corners, and a guy like DeJean, who was somebody that could have been on the 49ers draft board. They went with Ricky Pearsall. Like, again, I'm not saying, hey, they screwed it up or anything like that, but you got to draft guys that are impactful. And I think the defense is void of talent more than just scheme. I think Saleh comes back and helps the scheme, but I think they need a few more blue chippers, especially up front on the defensive line.
I think it was interesting looking at some of these other teams and how they're building, and there's some really good GMs in the sport. I mean, Roseman is at the top of the game, right? At top of his game. Brett Veach in Kansas City is a great GM. Les Snead in L.A. with the Rams is a terrific GM. Eric DeCosta in Baltimore is a phenomenal GM. There's a lot of teams that
who they're all going after? You know who all those guys are going after? Myles Garrett.
Yeah.
Miles. Wow. I think all those guys are going after Myles Garrett.
Should
Buffalo.
The Niners?
Hell yeah. Yeah, they should.
What would you offer? Could you get him for the 11th pick? Would you offer the 11th pick?
Man, that's I think if you could get Myles Garrett, you would. I think it would take more than the 11th pick. I think it would probably take 11 and another pick on top of it. Not another first, but maybe another second or third or something. I think it takes
some
more
combination
more
of players or picks. Yeah.
Yeah, and look at our roster, right? Like I'm calling the Browns. It's like, hey, if there's a guy you like, maybe you take him. Maybe it's another pick, in the middle of the second or third rounder somewhere. 11, maybe we'll take a guy back. Like I don't know. I'm sure it'll come out that the 49ers have called, but and again, that doesn't necessarily fix the interior, but if you've got Bosa and Myles Garrett on the edges, I mean, look out. At that point, I mean that's how you make a dramatic impact very, very quickly on your defense, and then if you get that done, and then you end up trying to get some defensive tackle help as well, maybe mix in a linebacker middle round, something like that, then I think you got some action.
Well, I mean, not only that, Vic Fangio, if you want to look at the Super Bowl, did you see a ton of blitzes? No, you really didn't.
Well,
because you
they didn't
saw
have to.
them get it done with their front four. And that's the thing. If you look at Robert Sala's tenure with the Niners or even his tenure with the Jets, I mean, he rushed four and blitzed very infrequently. So that's the way he wants to play. So if you want to get it done with your front four, that's great. You better have a dominant front four. If you have Myles Garrett opposite Nick Bosa, he's quite a bit better than Leonard Floyd. He's quite a bit better than Dee Ford. He's quite a bit better than Samson Ebukam and anybody else the Niners have had during this regime. So I think you got to absolutely kick tires on that. I will say this too. I mean, if I were looking at it, I just think the Niners should look instead of looking from the outside in, they should look from the inside out. And what I'm talking about is I think they got to get real serious about the point of attack on defense, defensive tackle, and the point of attack on offense, center, and guard. And I think if there was one team, Gutekunst, the Packers GM, I thought really handled free agency really well. They didn't win this year, but he signed Xavier McKinney and Josh Jacobs. And the rest of it, he just said, I'm going to go build in the draft. I'm going to go get two elite free agents at positions of need and difference-making players. And other than that, I'm going to do the rest in the draft. And I wouldn't have a problem if the Niners copied that. And I'll tell you, the two guys that I would be knocking at their door day one on March 12th, DJ Jones, former Niner, who's absolutely a wall inside. I really believe they would have beaten the Chiefs in Super Bowl 54 if they had had a healthy DJ Jones. I really believe that. And he wasn't healthy, and they gave up a lot of rush yards that day. But get DJ Jones on your defense and just plug him next to Evan Anderson, and now you've got the makings of a real monster, or Collins, or whoever you want to throw in next to him. And then go after Drew Dahlman. Go after Drew Dahlman on offense. The Niners spent money at center and with Weston Richburg, Alex Mack. I don't care what Chris Forster says. I was not impressed by Jake Brendel, and I don't know why Forster talks him up so much, but I don't see the genius in going with Brendel. He was a Pro Bowl alternate 3 years ago, but times change and you got to adapt. To me, if you could get Dahlman at center and DJ Jones at nose guard, or at least at defensive tackle in their 4-3. I'll take my chances. I'll take my chances building the rest through the draft, but an absolute force against the run, and then a veteran center that can potentially allow you to run inside the 5. That's where I'd start.
I love it. I mean, there's no bigger DJ Jones fan than me. I mean, every time I think we've had a conversation about where do the 49ers go, he's always somebody that's at the top of my list, and a guy that I think really, when he left, it spelled the beginning of that interior decline, and then you look at Buckner, and then Armstead ends up gone. I mean, it was just, you think of some of the big names that the 49ers have had through the years, guys that would play on the interior. Sometimes Eric would slip outside, but I mean, those guys, you got to get back to having that, right? Big name type players in that spot. And so I think that's really first and foremost, free agency and the draft is where I would probably look to address that, assuming that the 49ers wind up keeping their pick. And then, again, if there was a spot on offense, I would probably look in the draft at tight ends again. I just think,
great draft for
Kittle's getting up there. There's some good tight ends. And I think the Niners could flourish running, more two tight end sets in the run game and in the pass game. Open up the middle of the field a little bit. I think that's one way to mitigate the fact that you're going to be, I think, potentially a little bit thin with now Debo Samuel on the outs, and you're going to have Ricky Pearsall, obviously, and then Brandon Ayuk's going to be working his way back from an injury at some point during the season, probably more toward the middle than the beginning. I mean, we'll see on that, but so they're a little thin at wide receiver. Well, can Jacob Cowing make an impact? I don't know. I think they might need one more vet wide receiver just as a little bit of an insurance policy. But I think if you get the tight end, then the wide receiver aspect of it isn't quite as important, and you can continue to let Ricky Pearsall build off of what was a really strong finish to the 2024 season.
No, I think it's super astute by you. It is an amazing tight end draft, and it's a really relatively thin wide receiver draft. And
you
maybe
don't have to
you
pay
draft
those guys as much either.
Right. That's a good call. And also, hey, maybe you just, you go more 12 personnel. You put 2 tight ends on the field. You run the ball out of 2 tight ends. This draft for tight end is absolutely stacked. The Penn State kid, Warren, the Michigan guy, Loveland, the Bowling Green kid, Fannin, the Miami guy, Arroyo, lit it up in the Senior Bowl. Jason Taylor's kid from LSU is an amazing player. Mitchell Evans from Notre Dame is a hell of a player. Stanford's best player transferred to Georgia, Benjamin Urasek. That guy's a hell of a player. There's 10 or 12 more guys even than that, and that are all tight ends. Let me ask you about Debo. Debo wants out. That came up this weekend. Where do you think he's going to wind up, and what are the Niners going to get in return? What do you think?
I don't think they're going to get a lot in return, and it's unfortunate because the cap hit that's going to be involved there is unfortunate. That's something that you're going to have to account for on the books. I think in a perfect, but I also think the relationship's done. I think he's no longer a productive player. I think something happened over the course of this year that frayed internally there, and he was just not as productive. And I think there were times where he kind of shut it down, and then there was an attempt to try and kind of get him back on board by targeting him as much as they did in the Rams game that he had the drop. The big drop, obviously, that effectively ended the 49ers season there in early December. I would also be careful where I send him if I'm the Niners, because I feel like there's a little bit of I'm not saying that Debo has this level of juice left in his game, but I'm going to use there's a little bit of Jimmy Butler to Debo in that I feel like he was kind of done. And he was I think he kind of quit on the Niners a little bit. And I think he also still might have a little. People thought Jimmy Butler was washed, right? Because of everything that was going on in Miami. It kind of got misconstrued. And, we've watched Debo, and Debo looked like a guy that might be on the downturn. So it's a little bit of a different situation. And Jimmy Butler obviously is a better player than Debo in the context of NBA and NFL players. But I do feel like Debo's got a little bit of that. I'd like to get somewhere because I know I still have a little in the tank and stick it to the Niners because they kind of quit on me and then I quit on them. So I would be looking, if you're not going to get much for him, I would be looking to send him to Jacksonville. I'd be looking to send him as far away
AFC
as possible. The Jets. I'd be looking to send him to the Browns. I'd be looking to send him to and those are a couple of those teams the Niners play next year, Jacksonville and the Browns. So, but I would be looking to send him somewhere, believe it or not, where he can't hurt you. I'm not saying go all in like you're trying to be vindictive or anything, but I don't want to see. I really don't. If I'm the Niners, want to see him all of a sudden he's on Seattle, or all of a sudden he's on the Rams, or all of a sudden he's Green Bay's got him, or so I would do whatever you could to ship him somewhere to where if you do have to deal with that, you're dealing with it a year from now and not this upcoming season.
Washington is the betting favorite. That's kind of interesting. Obviously, Adam Peters knows him quite well.
Sure.
He put himself in his story in a Denver uniform and was like, hey, how cool would this be?
Okay, that works.
So there's that. Baltimore went after him. Denver might not be bad. That might be a bad location to send the Raiders.
You don't play
maybe the
Denver.
Raiders.
Yeah, you don't play Denver, and Denver's also probably not winning the Super Bowl next year, or a team you're going to play the Super Bowl. So Denver works. Maybe I'm overthinking it a little bit.
No. I think I definitely think that he could have a big year somewhere 1 year. I don't think he's going to have I'm not worried about, oh my God, he's going to have 3 great years. I think he's at the end. Just look at the history of the guys who run through you, and he's a run through you guy. They typically are done by 28. He's 28. He's probably done. I love the idea of the Jets, though. If you could get Garrett, how about Debo and a day 2 pick for Garrett Wilson? Because the Niners are going to need a receiver back, and it's not a good receiver draft, and I don't think they can afford to sign a T. Higgins. At least Garrett Wilson, you still got him on his rookie deal. He runs 4.38. That's the move I would try to make. But I'll say this about the Niners. I think it's pretty obvious listening to Lynch, if you want to take him at face value, at the end of the year presser, he's like, hey, we're not in the business of giving away good players. So the idea that they might release Samuel with a post-June 1st designation and try to save that $17 million over the next couple seasons, I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to trade him before that bonus money comes up and take a little bit of a $15 million cap hit to make sure that they get some draft pick compensation. I don't think they're going to get a lot. I think they're going to get a 5th round pick or a 4th round pick, or that's why I'm suggesting maybe partner or package him with a pick or 2 and see if you could get a younger, healthier, faster receiver that's a better complement to JJ and Pearsall in the receivers you have left. Because I don't know if they can do it in the draft, and I don't see a real obvious name in free agency. People have thrown T. Higgins out there, but T. Higgins is going to make $30 million a year. They can't afford that. So I don't know if I see and I don't like this receiving core without him if they don't add something to it. I mean, I don't love it. Let's just say that. So they're going to have to get creative. Debo's
not even a traditional receiver. Like, he really is. I mean, that's part of the problem is, like, Debo can't run normal routes and be effective consistently. I mean, that's as big a part of the problem as far as Debo as the fact that he isn't running through people the way that the way that he used to. So I think it's probably a 4th rounder. Yeah. I wouldn't be looking to send anything out with him necessarily unless you're really going to get somebody good back. I mean, I think Garrett Wilson, that scenario I think would be a dream. Like, I think that's almost like that's
probably wishful thinking.
Would do that. but I like the idea.
JD, awesome stuff, man. We'll let you go. Have a great night. Thanks for jumping on. It's always good to rap with you, no matter what sport we're talking. Niners, Giants, Warriors. You and I can do it all anytime, man. So thanks for jumping on, and hopefully we'll see you later this week.
Yep, absolutely. Dubs OT tomorrow and Thursday. Warriors and the Mavs, and then Warriors and the Rockets before the All-Star break. And Jimmy Butler, 2-0 in that Jimmy Butler era.
2-0. JD, thanks again, man.
You got it.